Hey guys, we're going to be moving on to the next part of our project with this Mastercraft, and that's going to be upgrading the stereo for this boat. We're going to be doing a couple different things. We have a JL Audio M500 3-channel amp that we'll be installing that will be powering both the tower speakers that we installed on the new rack as well as our 10-inch subwoofer right here. We will be installing a new head unit, and that comes with 2 of these puck controllers that can be placed anywhere in the boat. We'll also be installing a dual zone volume controller. One of the zones will be hooked up to the subwoofer, so we can control the subwoofer levels from the driver's seat as well as the tower speakers. So that way everything will have its own individual zone. We'll be running a lot of wiring for this, and I'll show you everything we do in that process as well as wiring up the amp. We will be building a custom panel for it to sit underneath the seat, tucked away from everything else, and that should be pretty much it. Should be a pretty quick process, not a whole lot going on here that's too complicated. We'll be installing the subwoofer in the hallway between the driver's side and the spotter's seat, so that way it's out of the way as well, but still giving good sound. We're going to start by removing the old head unit and using the wire harness that comes with this and hooking up the new head unit, so I'll walk you guys through that. Okay guys, we are going to start the process of upgrading our sound system by removing our old head unit and installing a new head unit with Bluetooth and some separate zone controls and things like that. So we've got our new head unit in our box right here. It's our new Fusion head unit. And that comes with all the harnesses we'll need in order to hook up into the old wiring. And in order to remove this old one, all we have to do is, there's 2 rubber covers right here that cover the screws, and then there's 4 Phillips bits. So we're just going to go ahead and unscrew all 4 of those. Now it looks like we might have some supports in the back holding this radio in, so we're going to pop up the seat here and see what we can find back there. Alright, so I was able to go under the seat and just remove some of the wires, and there was one nut hooked up to a harness that was back there that I just unscrewed with a wrench. So now I'm able to pull out the head unit. I unplugged everything that was back there while I was back there, so that way I could just pull it out when I came back up here. So here's our old head unit. It looks like in order to access the harness that we will be rewiring, we will have to go under the spotter seat again and cut all the wires back there in order to get to them. All right, so I was able to pull our old wire harness out from underneath the dash there. All it was held in by this clip here. There's just 2 pinch points. You squeeze them together and pull it away from the rest of the wiring there. As you can see, we've got all of our wires here. They all coordinate to either the speakers, to power and ground, or to the remotes. And these colors in this actually all match up with our new harness here. So what we'll be doing is we'll be cutting off the old harness tip here and then splicing in all of our new wires here. They're all the exact same colors. They might be a little bit of a different shade, but the wires actually all have the description on them of where they run to, and so do our new ones with these tags. So you can just match it up color to color, and then if you're not sure on the color, just read what. All right, so we're going to go ahead and trim off our old harness here, and then start stripping back our wires so that we can heat shrink connect all of these with butt splices. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and cut off this old harness. All right, so I've got all these stripped back. There's two that I left unstripped, which is the telemute, which is supposed to mute it if you have the phone application hooked up, and then the dim one. Our old harness doesn't have a dim radio wire. And then one thing I did notice is our 12 volt constant and power are two separate ones that aren't on this. So I'm going to figure out if we even need to use the yellow wire or if it'll be able to tell automatically when to turn on. I'll have to do some testing with that. We're going to go ahead and crimp all these wires together now though. So I like to pull them all apart by color because that's the speaker group that they're going to typically. So we'll start with the green here on the bottom and then find our green here in our harness. Pull them out. So we've got one green with a black stripe and one solid green. So we'll just match up our solid green to our solid green and our green with a black stripe to our green with a black stripe. And I'm just using some butt splice connectors here that will be able to heat shrink once we get all of them connected. It'll make for a clean install here. Alright, so now that we have all the necessary wiring done, we're going to do some troubleshooting here to make sure that our power wire is connected correctly, because we do have this yellow wire here, and I just want to make sure that we're not going to end up needing it to run the radio. So since it's a different type of harness than the old type, we may end up having to splice into this red wire to give it that 12 volts running, but we'll figure that out here in just a minute. All right, so I re-hooked up our wire harness in the back there, and now I'm just going to plug it into the back of our stereo. There's a lot more plugins that'll go in with this, but I just want to test this out before we heat shrink anything down or, go ahead with those steps. Everything is hooked up in the back of that for now. We will be running our wires back to our amplifier as well as our RCAs up to our dual zone control. So that will be part of our next steps here. We will need to configure a new plate to hold this in place. It's obviously a little bit different size than our old radio, so we will be getting a custom plate made to hold this radio in place, so that way it stays nice and firm. All right, we're going to be working on mounting our sub next. We're going to be mounting it here in the walkway between our driver's side and our spotter seat. We have a nice big flat surface here that we'll be able to put it in. That's also hollow behind, and we'll be able to run all of our wiring through to the back there. I just marked off, I used a level from our center point and marked off the 2 sides, you know, just balancing it out. And then now what I'm going to do is I measured the distance between the edge here and the edge here, and we got 18 inches. So we're going to go 9 inches in between these 2 sides, and then that'll be the center point for our sub. We now have the center point for our sub marked. We will be drilling in a hole there and then going out with a circumference of 9 7/8. So that'd be a radius of 4 5/16. 8 7/8 is actually the distance from edge to edge that we're going to need for our hole here. We're going to go ahead and round up to 9 since it's so close, and the sub does have a little bit of wiggle room. And so we're just going to use this as our center here. I'm going to get something to mark all the edges, or get a piece of wire that'll measure out to the exact distance we need, and then I'll mark out our circle for. All right, so I forgot a couple things, and I'm changing some things up. So one thing is the sub came in a box and it fits directly in the circle, so I'm going to use the circle as a template to help me out. I actually went out 4 7/16, which is actually exactly half of 8 7/8. So we do have our exact measurements from center here. And I went out 4 7/16 on both sides and on the top and bottom. And then I am able to line this template up then exactly where we need it to be. And then I'll outline that. I'll put some tape on the back side of it and tape it there and then outline it all. But because we're going to be cutting through gel coat, we do want to coat everything in masking tape. So I'm actually just going to tape off the area that I know I'll be cutting through, and I'll just remark these whole spots once I get to them. All right, so now we have all of that taped off. We still have our center mark visible. We are going to go 4 7/16 from the center up, from the center down, from the center to side to side, and then we'll tape on our template and then trace it out. All right, so we now have our 4 spots marked. I'm going to take our template here. And we are just going to line this up with our 4 dots that we just marked. Go ahead and tape that all down. Cool. So now we have our template here. And I'm just going to take my marker trace the edge of this template. All right. We should be able to pull that off. And we now have our circle that we need to cut out. We'll use our saw to do that. All right. So that hole is officially cut and ready to be fitted for our sub. All right, so we got our hole cut. Here's our sub. We're just going to do a test fit quick. Wow, that fits perfectly. So we did a really good job of cutting our hole there. Fits up nice and flush. Now all we have to do is mark out our holes for mounting, and we're actually going to bolt it through to the piece of plywood on the back, just so that it stays extra stable. All right, so we're going to cut out our support backing out of this marine plywood here. I'm just using the same box fitting that it came in because it has an exact cutout of what we need, and then actually moved that out an inch from the edge here on both sides, just to give it a little bit more structural stability. So when I do cut out the square at the end, I'll also add an inch on these sides. But for now, we're just gonna get the circle drawn out here, and then we will cut that out with the jigsaw, and then we'll go ahead and use the miter saw to cut the rest of it out. And I already measured. We've got an inch on this side as well as this side. So now we've got our hole cut, or hole drawn. We're going to take our drill here. Just going to drill a starting hole for our blade to fit into. All right, we got our hole cut. We're going to test fit with the subwoofer now. All right, that sub fits in there perfectly. So now what we'll do is cut the rest of this out, mark our holes for our bolts, drill the holes, and get that thing bolted into the boat. All right, we're going to go ahead and punch the holes for where we want our screws to end up on this. So I'm just going to poke in the cardboard while I've got the sub on here, and then we'll go through and hammer it. So we've got all of our holes marked here to be drilled, so we can use this as a mounting plate behind. Now what we'll do is measure out an inch, just like I had set up before, and cut out our rectangle here. We're going to save this to get our punch holes for the boat. All right, we're going to use our jigsaw now to finish cutting out that square. Actually, before we do that, we're going to pilot our holes. All right, we've got that piece cut, all the mounting holes ready to go. All that's left is to take our template here, put it back on the hole we cut on the boat, mark those holes, pilot them out as well, and then we'll be able to get the sub mounted up. All right, so I went ahead and taped my template on here. Now I'm just going to go through with those same punch holes and mark where we're going to drill through. All right, everything's drilled. I'm going to clear out some of the debris that's here. And then we'll go ahead and test fit our subwoofer. All right, so I put our subwoofer in here. I've got my plate on the back side here. I'll show you a picture of that afterwards. And right now, I've just got 2 screws in the top holding this in, or one here on the side and one in the top. And I'm just gonna go through and put the new ones in. All right, so I've got my subwoofer just sitting in here currently. 2 screws are in there holding it up. It's got the wood plating on the back holding or giving this extra support. We are going to put in 8 3-inch bolts. They have a washer on the front side as well as on the back side with a nylock nut to make sure none of that comes loose while it vibrates in there. So we're just going to go ahead and get each one of those tightened down, and then we'll be done mounting our subwoofer here. All right, so this subwoofer is fully mounted here. We are now going to work on running the wiring for the amp as well as building a divider for the amp to sit on. All right, that wraps up everything for this section of the radio and speaker installation. We got our head unit installed as well as our subwoofer mounted. In the next section of the video, we'll be getting our amp installed, running all of our wiring for our speakers, as well as carpeting our panels for the amplifier and the back panel of the subwoofer. We'll get that 2-channel knob hooked up. That's going to be over by the driver's side, so they'll have control over the tower speakers as well as the sub level. And that should wrap it up then for the installation of all of our videos.